coming up.
Given that the government of Quebec evaluated that at least 2,000 jobs would be affected, a plan of protection of caribou that does not affect too much Quebec.
Caribou don't vote and they don't have the ability to hire lobbyists.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Chair, I would like to table the following motion, that the committee starts a study of an emergency decree on forestries, and that this study focuses on the following elements: the social, economic effects on Quebec, given the dependency of a lot of communities on forestry, the impact of such a decree, given that the government of Quebec evaluated that at least 2,000 jobs would be affected, a plan of protection of caribou that does not affect too much Quebec, and to this end, that the committee holds 6 meetings at the least, inviting the Minister of Environment, of Natural Resources, of Transportations, as well as Innovation, Science and Industry for at least 2 hours each. The priority being given to the environment ministers 2 weeks following the tabling of this motion, and that we also invite Boissaco for 2 hours a day. That we invite Boissaco with other forestry groups, with unions representing workers, representatives from indigenous communities, and other witnesses as the committee sees fits. That we have a study on the decree, including an analysis of job loss following the adoption of this motion. The committee will send a letter to the Committee of Natural Resources to remind the chair to call back the committee to plan a study on this federal decree. The committee calls out any interference by the federal government in provincial competencies, and we will share our conclusions and recommendations to the chamber. Mr. Chair, we know that almost 2,000 people work in point of order, Mr. Chair. Yes, Madame Posey. I'm trying to see. First of all, we didn't get this motion before we start talking about it. So in the world where I'm from, the union world, when we table a motion, the person has the floor to talk about it. It might be different here. However, we have a motion here, a motion that is similar to what Mr. Deltel has just tabled. There might be a couple of amendments, but I fail to understand why we are not discussing the motion for which we are here today. Mr. Deltel is allowed to table his motion. We'll debate it, and we'll see how far it goes, and then you'll be able to table your motion. So I would like to adjourn debate. All right, so we have to vote. Adjournment of debate.
Mr. Longfield?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Oui.
Mr. Vancouverton?
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Monsieur Deltel?
Non.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux?
Non.
Monsieur Berthold?
Non.
Madame Posey?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Oui.
7 pour 4.
Alors, le débat sur la motion est adjourné.
The debate on the motion is now adjourned. Ms. Posey, go ahead. Yes, so now I am going to table my own motion. Thank you. So first of all, I am surprised to see that the Conservatives table a motion this morning, an emergency motion, even though I've been trying to reach them since August 2nd, and they have not communicated with me. They haven't communicated with me at all. So I worked we at the bloc worked on the motion, on a motion that was tabled and presented. Madame Posé, we have a point of order. Allow me to remind us all that we cannot attribute motives to our colleagues for their behaviors. The Conservatives have been trying to have emergency meetings since July on Mr. Guilbeault's emergency order on Caribou. So I want to specify the Bloc Québécois has been working since August to table a motion that you now have. Do I have to read the entire motion? So since you've received it in advance, that was also easier, so that the committee starts a study on the measures we need to take to adequately protect caribou by reducing the effects of economic activity from the forestry sector. That the study identify the issues that threaten caribou and the measures that can be taken to protect them. 2, the impacts of an emergency order on forestry and on caribou, the socioeconomic effects of forest fires on the communities, and the role of the forestry industry on carbon neutrality. That the committee host 3 meetings with the Minister of the Environment and public servants so that they can respond to that emergency order and the elements that they will consider, and that they also invite environmental experts, industry, unions that represent forestry workers, First Nations members, and all other witnesses deemed necessary by the committee, and that they publish and share the conclusions with the House of Commons. And we would like the members of the committee to be present to debate said motion. The fact that the minister has pushed back consultations by a month means that we are able to study this motion in depth, and it gave me time to refine the motion. During the consultations led by the minister, Minister Guilbeault, we ministers could not be heard, so it was the best way for us MPs to be heard on the topic. And this topic is at the heart of many other debates and counts for many people. People are affected and people are concerned. So we thought that participating in that debate, which is at the core of many things, needs to happen in this committee, and this is why we had to host this emergency meeting today. I would like to propose an amendment to my colleague's motion. So in the first paragraph, immediately after the forestry sector, it would say this: all economic activity related to the forestry industry, given that the government of Quebec has estimated that 2,000 jobs would be affected. So after the forestry industry, we would immediately say, given that the government of Quebec has estimated that 2,000 jobs would be affected. All right, so we'll have to debate the amendment. Who would like to start? Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are able to do both. We are able to protect woodland caribou, but we must protect jobs too, and that is under provincial jurisdiction, and they have full powers to do so. And we already know the province's plans. And since 2018, we've known that the situation was dire. There were alerts, and the Minister of the Environment has reminded us all of that situation in a letter that he sent to Minister Guilbeault. So we are ready to find solutions, but solutions already exist. Solutions were already deployed by the government of Quebec to protect these jobs. We believe in those solutions. We trust the government of Quebec on the issue.
I would like to thank Madame Posé for her leadership in recalling the committee for this meeting. I would just say that she's been in touch with me a couple of times and with other members of the Liberal side of this committee over the last couple of weeks and months. But any effort to recall this committee from the Conservative side has happened independent of any outreach to me. I thank my friend and colleague Gerard Deltel for reaching out during the Olympics to congratulate me on 20 years since I won a medal at the Olympics. But we didn't talk about committee business. So I applaud everybody's enthusiasm and interest in this important issue. I also had an amendment to provide. I suppose I'll provide it after we conclude the,
we'll vote on this
debate on this.
Yeah.
Our efforts are to protect both jobs and caribou. I think they have to happen independently of one another, or together, I would say, and not independently of one another. But I also know that, like all aspects of nature, caribou don't vote and they don't have the ability to hire lobbyists. So sometimes we have to, consider their well-being as well, and more of an advocacy perspective, because it's not as though nature always has its lobbyists on the Hill. So I share the aspirational component of ensuring that we protect jobs and our natural environment at the same time. And I'm certain that this committee will continue its good work in consulting with stakeholders and experts in that regard, so that we can provide recommendations to the government.
Monsieur Berthold.
First, we're talking about this motion that was tabled by the Bloc Québécois. And at the beginning of the summer, we agreed that all discussions would happen between House leaders and that we would agree to this way of doing things. And House leaders from the Bloc nor from the government did not call us and did not mention recalling this meeting. They talked about the Natural Resources Committee, and the Bloc Québécois rejected that. So I don't know why the Bloc Québécois rejected our request for a meeting of the Natural Resources Committee, which is super important for Caribou and for jobs. And we would also get to talk about provincial jurisdiction. So I don't understand. And yes, they're saying that the Caribou cannot hire lobbyists, but I don't know how the Bloc Québécois will continue supporting the Liberals. Currently, the government of Quebec is lobbying for caribou. They are the ones who said that there was interference, undue interference. I'm going to read what Ministers Blanchette and Charette said when they found out about the federal government's intentions to impose this radical order. They said, we agree and we want caribou to survive. And we agree with the government of Quebec. It is their jurisdiction. But I continue. Your government's use of an emergency order is undue interference. Management of public lands is under the government of Quebec's exclusive jurisdiction. And when I hear my Liberal colleagues say that the government of Quebec is lobbying when it is their jurisdiction and their responsibility, they are the ones who are able to protect forestry jobs and caribou. So that's insulting. It's a bit insulting to hear that coming from my Liberal colleague, and I don't know how the Bloc Québécois can support that position. There's a point of order.
What's the point of order?
Well, I just feel as though my words are being taken completely out of context.
We know that's
how...
not a point of order. That's a point of debate. We hear this all the time in the House.
Sure.
But go. Please note, Mr.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Yes, I heard the comment. Yes, I know that we can't backtrack. He said what he said, and unfortunately, that's how I interpreted it. All of this is happening in a situation where, for over a year, the Conservative leader, our leader, Mr. Poilievre, has clearly denounced the federal Liberals' intent to impose a radical order that goes against Quebec's jurisdiction on their forests and their land. That happened the first time was in April 2023. We cannot agree to a motion like this one without talking about jobs and without talking about the families that may lose their jobs due to a radical application of due to a radical position of the environment minister. So I support this motion. The government never supports the forestry sector on the international markets. You know that the Americans are imposing tariffs, and they're close to 15% now on lumber. So now we have a motion of substance, a motion that sets aside all the cliches and that does not use the Poilievre method. The Poilievre method is to use threats and to insult, and they're trying to get the population to be more unhappy, but I don't think that's how we need to fix things. So we are tabling a motion. I have a point of order. Yes, it's going to be fascinating. Mr. Chair, I just want to say that defending Quebec's jurisdiction is not a threat. That's not a point of order. Yes, but for my colleague, we've said many, many times that that the federal government will never put their fist on the forestry sector. It is not up to the federal government to control Quebec's forestry sector. This is the Quebec government's role. We'll debate later.
So it's very surprising. The Bloc Québécois refused on 2 occasions. It refused on 2 occasions to let the forestry sector speak out about the future of the industry. After all, the Bloc Québécois says it cares about Quebec jurisdiction. And we were proposing 2 meetings to talk about all this. So thank you. I just wanted to set that straight, Mr. Chair. Because my colleague, who's very emotional about this, got carried away. But actually, he doesn't seem to be fully up to date on occurrences. Mr. Van Couverden.
Mr. Van Couverden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Excusez, vous pourriez baisser la main, Monsieur Martel, baisser la main.
Mr. Martel, could you please lower your hand?
Si, Monsieur Van Couverden.
Mr. Van Couverden.
We can spend all afternoon talking about whose idea this was or who cares more about Caribou, but we should also consider just getting on with the substantive matter that we're discussing today. For our part, we support the notion of adding jobs to the motion, and we would provide a sub-amendment to that so that we can just vote once and move on, if that's okay. That sub-amendment I can distribute basically just asks for a 4th meeting, and the 4th meeting would be to accommodate 1 additional stakeholder, and that
sorry,
that includes.
Mr. Van Couverden, that's not a sub-amendment; it's another amendment. So we have to dispose of this one first, and then you can propose your amendment.
I think we can do it as a sub-amendment, and it doesn't negate any aspect of the current amendment on the table.
That you're proposing 4 meetings instead of 3. That would involve amending the second part of the motion, changing 3 to 4. Whereas right now we're discussing the first part of the motion, which is and the proposed amendment is to add some words at the end of the first sentence. So can we dispose of the amendment, Mr. Berthold? Was it Mr. Berthold?
If you want it to be 2 steps, then that's fine.
Yeah,
it can be 1 step if you use my method.
Otherwise, I'll get very confused as chair, and that's not a good thing. So, okay, alors, est-ce qu'on peut...
So the amendment is, given that the government of Quebec has evaluated that at least 2,000 jobs will be affected, and that will be added after forestry. Okay, that's very simple. Let's go on to the vote then, please.
Madame Chatel? No. Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
In favor. Madame Shanahan?
In favor.
Mr. Van Couverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Monsieur Deltel?
Pour.
Monsieur Lehoux? Pour. Mr. Leslie? Pour. Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
En faveur.
That amendment is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment that I'm proposing just changes the committee hold a minimum of 4 meetings, and that the committee under B include an additional and specific stakeholder. And it would read, including AFNQL's Guylaine Picard, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur, and the Boyasco Cooperation for 1 hour.
Okay, so I'll go to the English version of the motion. The amendment basically is to say, to this end, the committee hold a minimum of 4 meetings, so 3 changes to 4. But then, where do you want the second amendment to be inserted?
That will go under B, and in the French it's different. For some reason, there's numbers rather than letters, but in the English version, it says
the First Nation concerned, I guess, comma, including
and any other witnesses the committee deems necessary.
Yeah,
which is there already, comma. The new part will include, including AFNQL's Guylaine Picard, comma, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur and the Boyasco Cooperation for 1 hour. I can send it to the clerk.
Can you send it to the clerk, and we'll, and then we'll have the exact wording which we can read out.
Point of order, please. This is an amendment that will amend 2 completely separate portions. Yes. So do you want to start by voting on the matter of the number of meetings? Yes. Okay. Let me just make sure we have the second amendment, and then we can do them separately. So now let's start with the vote on or on the debate, with the debate to move from 3 to 4 meetings.
On your proposed amendment?
I think Mr. Berthold intervened, but I think I still have the floor. It's my amendment, and I think it's perfectly fine to have 2 sections where we amend. The reason that we're increasing the number of meetings by 1 to 4 is to include Mr. Picard. So it's not appropriate to vote in 2 rounds. It's entirely standard to just vote once on this. And I'm currently sending it to you and the clerk.
Point of order. Just in order to help you, Mr. Chair, just to help everyone for the better functioning of the committee, there are several different points here. There are different witnesses. If we go in this direction, there's going to be sub-amendments. There will be quite a lot of sub-amendments. I have a friendly amendment. No, I'd prefer to rule on this matter. Yes, but I have a friendly amendment to propose to Mr. Van Couverden. The amendment would be that a 4th meeting be held, and that at that 4th meeting, we invite Boyasco, Ghislain Picard, and so on.
I know the 3 to 4 I get, but what you wanted to include the AFNQL? What could you read your amendment again? There
are only 2 aspects of the motion which I intend to amend. The first is that we hold a minimum of 4 meetings, and the second is that after the current line and any other witnesses that the committee deems necessary, we include, comma, including the AFNQL's Mr. Picard, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur, and the Boyasco Cooperation for 1 hour. And the amendment to suggest that we could, the sub-amendment or the friendly amendment, to make it like all in one sentence, it does make it seem like it's just one amendment that way, but this is totally standard, and there's no reason why we should be voting on it twice.
Here's the way I see it. Sorry, just a second.
Yes, so I understand Mr. Berthold's point. He wants to split this, and that is his right.
Do you want to have anything more to say about your amendment?
Just that, we passed a CPC amendment, and, when I suggested that this could just be a sub-amendment, it was deemed not possible. I would say the same about a sub-amendment for this one. The amendment is not to split it. I say we vote on the amendment as such and move forward.
Okay.
I don't know why my sub-amendment was deemed ineligible, my recommendation, and then this sub-amendment is being considered to split it in half. I was trying to expedite, move along and have one vote for
we're gonna
ask, now we're just trying to slow it down.
Yeah. We're gonna ask if anyone else wants to speak to your amendment, Monsieur Berthold.
I would like to table a sub-amendment that the committee hold at least 6 meetings, 4 to 6 meetings. Yes, and I will speak to my sub-amendment. Many ordinary people and workers are concerned about the federal government's decision to interfere in areas of Quebec jurisdiction, as though Quebec were not perfectly capable of protecting both caribou and jobs at the same time, as if Ottawa knows everything and can do better than Quebec on this matter. No, we need more meetings on this subject to show that the federal government is doing the wrong thing here and that it should instead trust Quebec, as we do, to protect both caribou and forestry sector workers who have not yet been able to speak up on this. We need to allow all sorts of stakeholders to speak to this issue. 4 meetings will not be enough. Madame Posé, please. On the sub-amendment, please. Yes, on the sub-amendment, we believe that 4 meetings will be sufficient. Mr. Deltel, please. Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate to see that we're not able to agree on adding just 2 meetings. For us, things are very clear. As Mr. Martel and Mr. Berthold clearly stated earlier, thousands of people will be directly affected. And beyond forestry sector workers, there will be socioeconomic repercussions in these entire regions. That's why we need to hear from as many witnesses as possible. Are we really going to argue about this for just 2 meetings? Such a small difference? Let's all work together to help people.
Okay, Monsieur Berthold.
To answer Madame Posé's questions, we don't have to do it in September in the normal schedule. We can do it next week. We can hold all of our meetings next week because we know it's an emergency. There's a lot of concerns among the communities. And so it wouldn't affect the rest of our work. So I don't know why we have to limit ourselves to 4 meetings when a lot of people have a lot to say about this radical order. Before going to Madame Posé, I would like to say that we need a certain notice to witnesses to allow them to get organized so they're ready to testify here. So doing it in a couple of days is ambitious. Madame Posé. I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Monsieur Simard. For once, I agree with my conservative colleagues. It is true. We can't believe that Ottawa knows best. We want to defend Quebec's interest, and I hope that the Conservatives, when comes the time to talk about Bill 21, they will remember this. But why 4 meetings, Mr. Chair? Because what this report has to do is to influence the minister when he will write his order. And the minister wants to finish his consultations by end of September. So I want to hear the witnesses that will show us a different side of the story. So if I want to influence the minister's decision, then we have to act quickly to make sure that the minister understands the issue and understands what our witnesses have to say. I've lived this situation in the Natural Resources Committee. We want to make sure that this is not about putting forward an ideology. We will not invite the whole of all of the ministers. We want to hear the main stakeholders, hear them as soon as possible so that the committee can make its recommendations, that the minister respects Quebec's jurisdictions, and that's the most important. Thank you. Monsieur Van Couvenet?
Deltel, no. Okay, we'll go straight to Mr. Deltel.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
I'd be curious to hear It's kind of curious to hear the member from the Bloc Québécois always complaining about the federal intervening in provincial jurisdictions. What happened earlier? We have tabled a motion saying that the committee is against all interference by the federal in provincial jurisdictions, and who voted against it? Well, it was the Bloc. Now, if the Bloc wants to hear only one minister, that's fine for him, I understand, but I think that the Quebec lieutenant will have to talk here and let us know on which side he is. Is he on the side of the Quebec Premier or on the side of the Liberal Party? 6 meetings is very little for this issue. when we consider that 2,000 jobs are being threatened by this Liberal government. Mr. Chair, Monsieur Van Couverden?
I just want to point out that the Conservatives have arrived here suggesting as though that this meeting was their idea. It was not. They didn't propose 6 meetings until I proposed 4. And if it was really important to them to have 6 meetings, then they would have arrived with their initial motion, which they crafted seemingly overnight because nobody on the committee had heard of it. It would have been their priority. It seems as though they want to take full credit for this meeting. That's fine. But they didn't propose 6 meetings until I proposed 4. So if they thought it required 6, then they would have come prepared with that, and they didn't. This meeting was not their idea. It was Madame Posé's. So let's just get on with it and vote and have these important meetings so that we can get to the real work.
Are we good with voting on the sub-amendment, which is to change 4 meetings to 6? Okay, let's go.
Madame Chatel? Mr. Longfield?
Opposed.
Mr. Van Couverden?
Against.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Datel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Oui. Monsieur Lehoux? Oui. Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
No.
Monsieur Baudresse?
Contre.
So the sub-amendment was defeated. I would like... The second amendment is, I have it in French somewhere, including the APMQL, the municipality of Sacré-Cœur, to cooperative Bois-Sacco for an hour. The question is it 1 hour for all these witnesses or for each of them? So what I would like to propose is that we hear each one of these witnesses for 2 hours each, including Ghislain Picard, from Sacré-Cœur, Bois-Sacco, for 2 hours each. I have the English version.
Each.
Each, okay.
Debate, or can we vote? I have letters here that were sent by stakeholders in the forestry industry, by the government of Quebec. I have a letter signed by Bois-Sacco saying... that was sent to the Prime Minister Trudeau. And let me just quote some bits of this letter. Mr. Prime Minister, you need to know that it is impossible to replace the losses by other different regions. It seems you have magical thoughts. Sustainable development can help climate change. Here we have these 2 issues. We have scientific explanations that will be made by Bois-Sacco, so it will take more than 2 hours for Bois-Sacco to talk to us about this whole issue. Let us know why it is impossible for Bois-Sacco to replace the amount that would be lost. Point of order? We're debating the sub-amendment regarding whether or not the witnesses will have an hour or 2. So I would like to know here what's the link to the sub-amendment. We'll see. I spoke well in French. I'm explaining why we need 2 hours for Bois-Sacco, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of respect for people here, for witnesses who present to committees, unlike yourself, Mr. Drouin. It is important to hear them. I'm not like you. I don't have an attitude, a disrespectful attitude towards witnesses coming into to present to committees on which I sit. I have a letter from Monsieur Saint-Gelais, Monsieur Guilbeault. Your government has a choice. Either it will follow Monsieur Guilbeault's ideology or will stop this threat of order. And he is quoting Alphonse de Lamartine saying, we don't have 2 hearts, one for animals or humans. We only have 1 heart for everyone. So what Bois-Sacco is saying is that we have to protect both jobs and caribous. And Bois-Sacco wants to come here and let us know why. In an hour, it won't be enough time for them to let us know. Litière Royale, Ribco have also sent letters. We didn't have the opportunity to talk about about it, but we'll probably add them to the witness list. They also want to talk to us. Let me quote their letter to the Prime Minister. What your Minister of Environment is doing is not finding proper solutions. Mr. Chair, these people have a lot of things to say. We can't give them only an hour to talk about a topic that is so important. We're talking about 2,000 jobs. The future of the woodland caribou is an issue. So we have to make sure that we work together to protect both jobs and the caribou. So it's important to have 2 hours to hear Boissaco. Mr. Vancouverden.
Again, I applaud the Conservatives' recent interest in more meetings, and I would just say that if it was their priority and their strong opinion that we needed to have more, then they would have arrived at this meeting with their motion that they ran off the hop in the top of this meeting with those changes, but they didn't. So we arrived at this meeting with these proposed changes to accommodate 3 additional stakeholders. It's very standard to have an hour for 3 stakeholders. That's 15 minutes for opening statements and an additional 45 or an hour 45 for questions. It's more than adequate, and I would like to move on to voting on this amendment. And again, I'd thank the Conservatives again for their recent interest in engaging with stakeholders on this subject.
Madame Chatel.
It doesn't make any sense. Put your heart where your words are. It's unbelievable to think that we can have an economy that isn't based on the protection of the environment. Of course, we want to protect biodiversity. The caribou is also part of the economy. It's not just environmental. Both go hand in hand. And we need this sector. We need a good environment to have a good economy. So I don't see where the issue is. Could we vote on this one? And then we'll move on to the amendment as amended or not.
Chatel?
Contre.
Mr. Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Madame Shanahan?
Contre.
Monsieur Dattel?
Pour.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthold?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Non.
Monsieur Baudresse?
Contre.
The sum amendment was defeated. We are going to the original amendment by Monsieur Vancouverden. Could we vote on it? I think we've debated it enough. I think we went through the whole question. So let's vote on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Vancouverden.
Oui.
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Vancouverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
En faveur.
Monsieur Dattel?
Contre.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthold?
Contre.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Baudresse?
En faveur.
Donc l'amendement.
Monsieur Vancouverden's amendment was passed. Could we vote on the motion as amended? Mr. Chair, I have an amendment, and so we would like to add in the bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4 in Roman numbers the third element. Are you talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 or ABC? 1, 2, 3, 4 in Roman numbers, so we would like to add on the third one between the 2 and 3 the following element. The social economic impact on Quebec's communities. Could you read it, please?
So the social economic impact of an emergency order on Quebec's communities. I'd like to add that element. So what we're saying is that we would just be adding it. So an extra line. So the first paragraph is okay with our amendment. We're very happy. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So after 2, what we suggest is to add the following sentence. The socioeconomic effects of an emergency order on Quebec's communities. So 3 becomes 4 and 4 becomes 5. Okay, so that's clear and you all have it. Would you like to debate it? Well, brings us back to what we were saying earlier. So an emergency order is an extreme measure that we should only use as a very, very last resort. And if the government wants to infringe upon jurisdiction, sure. Emergency orders have a direct impact on thousands of people, especially the 2,000 people who work in the forestry sector. Is this sentence limiting us in the scope? No, it doesn't limit us. But here we're talking about forest caribou, woodland caribou, and this is not a species that is only in Quebec, but those who will come and testify will talk about their experience. This is why this is an issue that is provincial and not federal, because realities are different in different places. Yes, thank you. I think that you've clarified, and I understand very well that right now it's an issue that is affecting Quebec, but we have a federal act. So I can remind you that we have an Endangered Species Act and that it is under our jurisdiction. Am I wrong, Mr. Deltel? Maybe I'm getting confused with all the jurisdictions. The federal government has an Endangered Species Act. Yes, that act is federal. And now Mr. Deltel is saying that it is not a federal act. The amendment only mentions the impact. Yes, but he's saying that it's not our jurisdiction, but it's a federal act. So there is a link. It's related. Yes, but even though it's even though it is under federal jurisdiction, there can be an effect in the communities. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we completely agree that the impact of that order is felt here in Quebec. And as a member for Quebec, I was wondering whether Caribou has a similar order other than in Quebec. The answer currently is no. So I wanted to clarify that. Our colleague clarified, and I thank him sincerely. All right. Can we vote on Mr. Deltel's amendment?
Mr. Van Koeverden, you want to say something?
Just very briefly, that any species at risk or endangered species is entirely jurisdiction of the federal government, and that when caribou cross territorial and provincial borders, they don't have to surrender any papers or anything like that at the border. Just like water pollution and air pollution, caribou do not respect provincial and territorial borders.
Mr. Chair, I would like to clarify something for our colleague and Mr. Boulris. So the reason why we're not talking about caribou, it's because on point 1, we're talking about elements affecting caribou, so these animals are affected. But what the motion does not contain is the emergency order, and this is what we're adding to the argument. So this is not about redundancy. This is because the order is an emergency order. And if the minister hadn't been so aggressive and, might I even add, imperialistic, maybe we wouldn't be here today. But since we're talking about an emergency order, we need to mention it and add it. We can proceed to vote on Mr. Deltel's amendment.
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Van Koeverden?
Wait.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
Oui.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthod? Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
En faveur.
Okay, two en faveur.
And the
So the vote is unanimous. Now let's vote on the motion. Is there an amendment? So, Mr. Chair, in paragraph A, it says, invites the Minister of the Environment and officials, and this is where I'd like to add the amendment. So, invites the Minister of the Environment and officials to respond during 2 hours independently in the 7 days that follow the adoption of the motion. So we would add appear during 2 hours independently in the 7 days that follow the adoption of the motion. So I have a small modification to suggest so that to clarify things. So the minister would appear for 2 hours with his officials. So we want him to be there for 2 hours, and we also want his officials to be there. Mr. Chair, I want to hear from the minister. He can choose who will come with him, but I don't want the officials to be testifying at the table. Yes, but he would be there for 2 hours. Yes, I want to hear the minister for an hour, but I also want to hear the legal experts, the scientists. So the minister can stay, but I would like to have 1 hour with the minister and 1 hour with the officials. I want to hear them and I want to ask questions of them. Yes, but I think you agree that officials can come along with the minister. I never said the opposite. Okay, so 2 hours. So he has to be there for 2 hours, the minister, in the company of his officials. We don't need to add all of that. So the minister would be there for 2 hours. I think that saying that the minister shows up independently adds a gray area. Okay, so we can say that the minister appears for 2 hours independently. So I do not want to impose time limits to the minister. So I would remove in the 7 days that follow. So Mr. Drouin has a sub-amendment. Can we vote on Mr. Drouin's sub-amendment? So we would remove the in the next 7 days portion. He would like to remove in the 7 following days. Well, you can decide whether you agree or not, but we can vote on the idea of removing in the 7 days that follow. Mr. Chair, clarification. So we would remove independently? No, that's agreed. Mr. Berthold agrees. So we can remove independently, but we vote on in the next 7 days. That's what we're voting on. Ms. Châtel? Yes, so we're talking about removing the 7 days?
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Vancouverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
Oui.
Monsieur Delta?
Non.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthad?
Non.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulres?
En faveur.
D'accord. Okay.
So the motion has passed. Now let's vote on the amendment as amended. So that means without independently and without in the 7 days that follow. We would simply be voting on the amendment. Shall we vote on the amendment?
Mr. Longfield?
In favor.
Mr. Vancouverden?
In favor.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
En faveur.
Monsieur Delta?
Pour.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthad?
Pour.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulres?
Pour.
Parfait. Est-ce qu'on peut voter maintenant sur...
Wonderful. Mr. Chair, rather. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment to submit that the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change of the Government of Quebec, Mr. Benoit Charest, be invited. I would like to add that to the list after Section A. Very well. So after the Minister of the Environment and officials, that we invite Quebec's Minister of the Environment, Climate Change and Parks, Mr. Benoit Charest. Mr. Vancouverden.
Bringing in...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion already says that we can, list anybody we would like as an amendment or as a witness. I'm sorry. The Conservatives are well within their rights to invite anybody that they'd like on that list. I appreciate that perhaps the Conservatives have run out of proposed amendments and sub-amendments, but this one doesn't apply because it's already captured in the original motion. So I would ask that it be deemed redundant because it's unnecessary. We can invite.
I won't rule it redundant. I mean, we're naming people all over the motion. But it stands as far as I'm concerned. But can we just vote on it? Yeah. Yeah. Alors, can we vote on it? Then we'll vote on the entire motion, hopefully.
No.
No? Okay, we have more amendments after. But let's get rid of this one.
Mr. Longfield?
Against.
Mr. Vancouverden?
Against.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Madame Shanahan?
Against.
Monsieur Datel?
Pour.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux?
Pour.
Monsieur Berthade?
Pour.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Contre.
Cinq pour, 6 contre.
So he will not be invited. Yes, we've only got around 15 minutes left. And if I understand correctly, Mr. Deltel wants to present another amendment, and he has a right to do that, but let's move forward quickly. Invite the Minister of Natural Resources, the Minister of Transport, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry for 2 hours respectively.
I think it's up to you as chair whether or not we entertain endless amendments on this or if we vote on the original motion.
You know, I mean, I can't stop people from proposing amendments. I can't do that.
No, but I think you can move directly to vote on the original motion. Like, I truly think it's up to you, given the amount of time that we have today, to vote on the main motion or to just entertain this, like,
but what I will do, I can't do that. I can't do that. But what I will do is I will exhort members of the committee to get through this quickly. Like, you know, if you have an amendment, if a member has an amendment to propose, fine. But let's just vote on it and get this motion passed. So, I mean, so that we can organize the meetings.
But respectfully, Monsieur Deltel just indicated that he has lots of more amendments.
Well, maybe
so,
not.
you know, it's clear what they're doing. If we want to just
but then we'll run out of time. Then we'll run.
This is a standard way
Mr.
to run
Vancouverden,
meetings,
Mr. Vancouverden.
Endless
yes, Mr. Vancouverden. It's yes, I understand what you're saying. And if we just keep going on endlessly, what's going to happen is we're going to run out of time, and there won't be a motion, and we're not going to have a study. And I think everybody here wants to look at this. So that, okay, well, whatever. Maybe not everybody wants to look at this, but the point is, I think we want to, maybe we don't, I don't know what the committee wants. Let's vote on this one. Let's vote on this one.
Je vote non.
Madame Chatel?
Non.
Mr. Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
Non.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Oui. Monsieur Lehoux? Oui. Monsieur Berthade?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
No.
Okay.
Monsieur Boulris?
Okay.
No.
Okay, that was rejected. Yes, I have another amendment here. Now, the amendment is the following. To add to the list, order the government to produce all socioeconomic analyses of the impacts of the federal order, including analysis of loss of jobs that could be predicted for the 14 days following adoption of the order.
Madame Chatel?
Non.
Mr. Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
Non.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Yes. Monsieur Lehoux?
Oui.
Monsieur Berthade?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Oui.
16 pour, 5 contre.
Okay,
J'ai un amendement, Monsieur le Président.
Vous avez un amendement.
An amendment? So yes, again in the list, to add the following. That the committee send a letter to the Committee of Natural Resources to ask the chair to recall the committee to plan for a study on this federal order.
Monsieur Longfield?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
Non.
Madame Shanahan?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Yes. Monsieur Lehoux?
Oui.
Monsieur Berthade?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
No.
Monsieur Boulris?
Non.
Donc, c'est rejeté.
Monsieur le Président.
Oui.
J'ai un autre amendement.
I have another amendment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, it's a very short one. That the committee denounce all federal interference into provincial jurisdiction. This is not a session of constitutional law debate. This is completely irrelevant. In my opinion, this is straying quite far from the subject matter of the motion. We're getting into constitutional debate. At a certain point, the courts will rule on this, like with Kondiak, when there was a decree, when there was an order on that. I think that this is overstepping the bounds of what the motion is about, just for political reasons. Could you please give your ruling, Mr. Chair? No, I don't think this amendment is in order. No more amendments? Well, can we vote on the motion as amended?
Madame Chatel?
Oui.
Mr. Longfield?
Yes.
Mr. Vancouverden?
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin?
En faveur.
Madame Shanahan?
En faveur.
Monsieur Dattel?
Oui.
Mr. Leslie? Monsieur Lehoux? Monsieur Berthoud?
Oui.
Madame Posé?
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris?
Et oui.
Bravo. Donc, la motion a été adoptée.
Congratulations, everyone. Good work. And now I adjourn the meeting.
On travaille là-dessus. And then we'll send them a note.